Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, award-winning Nigerian writer, reports that she never realized how black she was until she moved to the USA. Well, unlike Chimamanda, I knew I was very black when I moved to these parts. When I was in England, I was very impressionable. So I thought that the other colors around me didn't know that I was black. I thought they assumed that I was just one of them, and they took me as one of them. That's what I thought. Well, it wasn't until I moved to North America that I realized that I was actually blacker than I ever thought. I had shared a room with a Caucasian individual for 2.5 years, or perhaps more. We lived like brothers. We were so nice together. We usually would tease each other about our smells of food and, you know, the fashion sense of Africans and Caucasians. We would just play with these things, very usual as roommates, right? Then one Sunday after church, we just sat down to enjoy a few bottles of beer and around here. I mean, that's normal, right? After church, you can drink beer. That was quite accepted. I mean, it's still the case, right? Unlike back home. So, in the course of drinking, he looked me intently in the eye and asked me, Benjamin, so when they say you are black, do you feel offended? And his voice mellowed at that point. And so he knew that it was a sensitive matter, right? So he almost like whispered it, right? And I asked him, but that's not offensive. That's what I am. That doesn't sound offensive, So we just joked about it, right? Now, years later, I would realize that well, perhaps there was a reason why Sheldon would ask me that kind of question. Now, on the matter of blacks, there are always known knowns. That is, there are things that we know, and there are unknown unknowns, the things that we know that we don't know, and there are also, as you would guess, unknown unknowns, the kind of things that we don't know that we don't know. That was by Donald Rumsfeld one time, Defense Secretary in the USA. I just borrowed that from him. But what do we know about blacks, really? Look, when it comes to black people, we know that perhaps the things that take us back is the rite of passage for funerals that we know that are quite concerning, too elaborate. And today, that happens to be the topic on this installment of Tissues of the Issues, your favorite YouTube program. Before we go any further, you want to help this channel grow by clicking on the button for notification. And also, most importantly, subscribing to this channel, leave us a comment, and also like the channel. So the topic for this week, you would have guessed, right? It's about funerals. If you paid attention to social media, in the course of the week, we have some little clips circulating about funerals in Tra that people erect fantastic architecture, and we understand there's even an air condition in all these funeral homes. There will be a curtain in there, and it's tastefully decorated just to house the dead. I mean, of course, there might be a few, exaggerations here or there, but this was what was going on social media this weekend. There have been a lot of commentary on it already, and so we thought we would discuss it here on this program as well. So the title for this week's installment is Air-Conditioned Tombs with Fluffy Carpets and Designer Perfumes. You heard that right. Air-Conditioned Cemeteries with Fluffy Carpets and Designer Perfumes. So when I saw the video clips, I was a bit alarmed because Chira is a place I know. Look, I was born and I lived my formative years in Sunyani. And Sunyani is just about some 25 minutes drive to Chira. It's about 19 kilometers thereabout. It's not very, very far. You could, we used to joke that you could put fufu, cassava, and banchi on fire and drive to Sunyani, and then you go back and, still it's good enough to eat, right? So we used to joke about it. So because it's very, very close. And one of the most important women that I call mother lives in Chira. So Chira is home to me. I go there as I will, right? Because my best friend of all time lives there. So I know Chira. And growing up, we didn't hear about these funeral homes and cemeteries that suddenly have become like real estate people building fantastic architectural marvels there just to house the dead. We didn't hear about these things, but now, so when I heard about this, I had to do my own checks. I sent forth people that are in charge to go have a look, right, at those cemetery real estate, as they call it, whether it's true. Well, reports came that, there are a few exaggerations here and there, but generally, you might mistake what you see at the Tra Cemetery today for some kind of real estate development because people are constructing fantastic edifices. I mean, not huge, but they look glamorous. They look quite expensive. And we understand, we can't confirm that, but we understand some of them install air conditions in there. But I don't believe that, though. They put woolen carpets in there just to make the dead feel comfortable. I don't also believe that. But the generality of the situation is that, as we would see in some parts of Ghana, funerals have taken a more concerning dimension. That even though we know that Africans and Ghanaians, we love funerals and it's more or less where we do our vacations because black people normally don't take vacations. So it's only on funeral occasions that people would travel. They don't mind traveling for hundreds of kilometers just to go enjoy funeral ceremony. So these things are happening and we want to find out. Now, if you remember a Kenyan scholar, is a scholar in African traditional religion called J.S. Mbiti. Long ago, he did a thesis, a seminal essay, and he described African as incredibly religious. That was in relation to things like the concept of time and the concept of rites of passage for funeral. But years later, we found that, people at the BBC and Western media, they came to also dig out what the African does, with things like funerals, because if you remember the themed caskets, where people would design caskets to suit the person's profession. So if you were a drunkard while you lived, then your caskets will be made of beer bottle, right? If you were a farmer, then perhaps a chili pepper, they will design your casket like a chili pepper, so you lie in that. And a popular, local prostitute died, and you guess right. They design, the coffin to look like, what I mean, right? Yeah. So these are themed caskets. So they could even design a casket to look like a fish because you're a fisherman. So these things have gone on for a little while, and then came the sensational pallbearers who would erect, put the casket on their shoulders and do combination dances around, enjoying. So these are things that we've all seen before, right? There was one occasion that in the course of the dance, one of the pallbearers missed a step and the casket fell off. And then indeed the dead body came out as well, and people were just crying that the man has actually died twice. So these are excesses of a culture that we all do know. But these days, I think we've carried it a ghost higher, right? With these elaborate tombs where we have, allegedly air conditioned in there, air conditioners in the tomb. We have woolen carpets in the tomb. We have even perfumes, right? Designer perfumes, so that the dead can actually, spray up and feel cozy as they journey there. But there's a reason for that, right? Because here in Africa, our thinking is that people just don't die. They merely transition to the other side. And so we remember them. People even name their case after those who are dead and all that. So we have, it's a culture that we came to meet, but now we think or we understand it's gotten a bit worse, and that is why today we want to discuss that. You remember when somebody died years ago? There was a 1 week funeral. A 1 week, it used to be a little gathering, so family would gather just to fix a date. That was what the 1 week funeral was for. 1 week celebration. That is what it was for. There were no elaborate posters, nothing fancy really. It was just to gather as family, fix a date for the main funeral. But these days, the 1 week funeral is more than the funeral itself, because it comes complete with the buffet, with big posters, expensive decorations, at expensive venue centers. So it's a whole huge ceremony just for the 1 week. So you just can imagine what will happen to the main funeral. That is where we have the real thing happening. So people will travel. It doesn't matter where the funeral is, they will travel and go. and go there. Now, during the funeral, so the only occasion that people would meet to decide on who will pay what, right? Weddings, they don't normally care. Funerals, people will donate money. Okay, families will go say, so let's share the cost. Who is bringing? Who is paying for furniture? Who is paying for canopy? Who is paying for food? So when the funeral comes, those who normally wouldn't pay anything, they will come in. All right, because there's that expectation that there will be donations afterwards, and then they will sit and also see what happens. So during funerals, people will spray money. It's all part of the ritual, right? And the more expensive the funeral, the kinder the judgment that this funeral was great, and the people actually love the dead very much. So if you didn't spend much, it meant that perhaps you didn't exactly love the person that was dead. So these are interesting aspects that we've left there uh, for some time now. But now there's another major issue that we need to pay attention to. Now, something I heard, and also I have done some little investigation, and I think it's kind of getting true, that there are also instances where the dead person is dressed up, gorgeously, and then in the spirit of communal eating or perhaps spiritual communion, they would dip the hands of the dead person inside food. So this food that people have gathered to eat. And then because of maybe he loved fufu or the dead person, that was his favorite dish, they would plant the hand of the dead, literally, in the food, soup, right? And people, family gather around and they eat with the dead, literally. So, and sometimes the body is almost like decomposing. So you will see these these green flies flying around your heads. And they've sat down with somebody who is dead and has been embalmed. And they've managed to stretch forth the hands of the dead into an earthenware pot. And there's soup around it, and there's fufu, and they're eating together with the dead, literally. Right? And we thought, well, perhaps we just sponsored a health concern, a disease that perhaps only the dead could cure. And so by this message, we're saying that, well, those in charge of these things perhaps want to take a bigger look that, well, if it's going to a point where we want to glamorize the dead so much that we can eat with them, their hands, the hands of a corpse in the same food that we are eating, then perhaps we need to pay some attention there. You remember that a one-time minister of tourism, I think his name is Ibrahim, he was interviewed and about what he's trying to do for tourism and to boost tourism in Ghana. And he said, well, he's trying to invest in funerals so that when people come to funerals, they will bus them to tourist attractions. It's all part of boosting tourism. We laughed at him, right? But I think on second thought, he had a point. Because where else would you see people gather in their numbers like a funeral in Ghana? It's only in a funeral that people would spend all they have to travel kilometers away just to be part of, a celebration of the day. So we need to perhaps check these things as we progress. But then again, the question that Sheldon asked me after we had done those BS comes back to me again. And this time around, I'm not even asking I'm asking the question on his behalf. That is there anything offensive about being black? Isn't there anything perhaps offensive about being black? Because you wonder, how come we carry such a mere rite of passage that was supposed to just be just a little honor for the dead to such lengths that are so concerning that we invest all we can. People borrow at higher bank rates just to fund the funeral. They don't mind where the money will come from. They just borrow money so that the funeral is big. The bigger, the better. Afterwards, if the donations that come in are not enough to defray the dead, they leave to just work and pay the debt on account of the debt, right? So this is the kind of people that we have become. And we thought, well, as other cultures are progressing with the aid of AI and all these, and the explosion of information in the computer era, it's all we can do. All we can do is to still be living with the dead, eating with the dead. Then perhaps we need to check it. So, what is our verdict for this installment? And as you do know, on this channel, we do a summary, say 10-15 minute summary of our weekly articles. So we publish an article every week in a newspaper called News Center. We have a column in the whole page column, and the title of the column is Tissues of the Issues. That's the column's name. So every week we have a column in there. We write an article in there, and we do a summary of that article on this channel so that those who can't read the paper can also access the content here. So we give a verdict of what we have discussed. And so that will be the gravamen of all the arguments that we have advanced in the article. Now, our verdict is that, as we know with all cultures, there will come that moment where some change will spark. Somebody will initiate some action, and that will spark of some change in there. Now, in terms of these funerals, we think somebody's going to change something, and it has started from Mori. Well, Mori is where the daughter of my mother-in-law comes from. You hear that right? The daughter of my mother-in-law comes from Mori. And so I know a thing about Mori. And in Mori, in the central region, the chief, I think is called Nana Obokese, the Ama First or something like that. He has decreed that there will be no expensive tombs at the cemeteries in Mori. So you can't erect a massive tomb, or you might do something, not a little indication to say, okay, somebody is buried here, but you can't do a tomb, something that looks like, an edifice, something not something you can't do a tomb in Mori, in the funerals over there. I mean, the cemeteries over there. He's also decreed that you cannot do buffets, expensive buffets at funerals. That literally, basically, he's saying, no expensive funerals. Let's invest in the living instead of the dead. And so, Maureen just taught us a little lesson there. Those carrying, these excesses too far, it's about time that we look back and say, well, people are gone and they're dead, right? Why not invest in the living? Those who are living, what are we doing for them? So Maureen just gave us that lesson. Nana Obokese, the Amma the First, more pure from me here. I'm your not your indigent, but I'm your in-law, more or less, right? So, and I love what you're doing, and continue. We know that you just started that change from there, it would catch up eventually. People will come to learn that, well, we cannot glamorize the dead to the detriment of the living, that we invest so much in the living. So when somebody dies in Ghana now, it's a whole headache, right? So you've lost a loved one. That's enough pain, but it's also a financial pain to it, because that's where you need to go mobilize resources, money. It's all money. People need to meet and decide on which cloth to get, and there's always a fight somewhere. Somebody, this is a messy affair. And so, as much as you want to make this perhaps industry like a tourist thing, if we may even do that, and as much as it's part of our culture, I think cultures in most places are evolving, and it's dynamic enough that we can change and look at the positive aspects of a culture like that, right? So this has been this week's issue of Tissues of the Issues. We'll come back again next week with yet another exciting one. But before we do go, if you can just click on the button for notification, and also, most importantly, if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe to this channel for us. Give us a comment so we know what you're thinking, and also like the channel. Thank you very much. The title again for this installment is Air-Conditioned Cemeteries with Fluffy Carpets and Designer Perfumes. Air-conditioned cemeteries with fluffy carpets and designer perfumes. Thank you very much.